We lost a great yesterday. We lost Reverend Jesse Jackson, former candidate for U.S. presidency in the Democratic primary of 1988. And yes, my friends, I am old enough to tell you that I voted for Jesse Jackson in the primary. I remember where I was. I was in college and I was thrilled to do it. He had come to, I guess, on our university was one of his stops on his tour, and he was an inspiration. And we can see what his influence has brought. He, just like MLK, he himself did not get to see the mountaintop. He did not get to see what is going to happen next. Because as Jesse Jackson rests in power, we need to summon our strength, our energy, and our hope, and bring down this fascist Epstein administration, Donald Trump, the Republicans, and all of them. They are a danger to our children. They are a danger to our health. They are a danger to our democracy. And most importantly, they are a danger to a vision of a world that should be and can be a multiracial democracy. Our world here in America, this is where we are headed. But not if we don't stand up for each other. And Minnesotans showed us it can be done. Minnesotans showed us that the lies they tell us, that so-called real America is white supremacist, fascist, hates immigrants. No, 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 no. We all saw that. We know it. And let me begin by saying that we don't have peace without justice. We don't go back to where we are. We move forward. Part of what democracy means is shared prosperity. We have seen what happens when billionaires call the shots behind the scenes, when a wealthy cabal of men get compromised by their worst instincts and their desire to circle wagons, to dominate and subject girls and women to their whims and their desire, again, for control and to exclude people who do not look like them from the public discourse. And I'm not just speaking about Jeff Epstein. I'm speaking about all the people in the realm of Donald Trump who subject themselves, kneel before them to allow the shakedown. Okay, before I get to that, because this is a show about money, power, and exploitation, and we're going to have the most amazing writer, Virginia Heffernan, who will be on our show at 9:15. Before we get to that, as a tribute to Jesse Jackson, and I'm sure you have seen this, but I need to see it again. We all need to see it again. This is his appearance on Sesame Street, a show that made all the difference in the world to so many children. I want to share this with you. This is his I Am Somebody. And you may want to get some tissues out to get through this.
Okay, here we go. I am somebody. I am somebody. I may be poor, but I am somebody. I may be young, but I am somebody. I may be on welfare, but I am somebody. I may be small, but I am somebody. I may make a mistake, but I am somebody. My clothes are different. My face is different. My hair is different. But I am somebody. I am black, brown, white, I speak a different language. But I must be respected. Protected. Never rejected. I am God's child. I am somebody. Give yourself a big hand.
This is what I remember from my childhood, this possibility, this dream. And people like me, Gen X, and maybe a little bit older, we're not letting this country continue to slide backwards. We will push our country forward. And I know folks younger than me, I know you want this too, and I want you to lead. I want you to know we have your back. I'll be showing up at all the protests, at all the rallies. We will, and the voting booth. Okay. So let me tell you that this country has turned into a nation of thieves. This is a kleptocracy. It is, Donald Trump is running essentially a mob shakedown type presidency. This man is sick and his tactics are in the gutter. And I'm not even going to give you a legal analysis. I'm going to describe for you first at this level, and future shows we'll dig into the legal weeds. I want to share with you just two examples that hit close to home for me and probably for you. Now, the other day, I'm sure you heard about, it was, I think it was last week when Donald Trump, out of the blue, suddenly announced on Truth Social that he was going to stand in the way of the opening of a bridge that connects my home state of Michigan, right here in Detroit, to Canada, to Windsor. Just so you know, this is Detroit. If I'm giving you the mitten here and I show this to you, Detroit is down here. Canada swings under. So if you think of Canada is above, but this part of Ontario, Windsor, is down below. So the bridge we are talking about is south of Detroit. And we are talking about a bridge that is called the Gordie Howe Bridge. There is already one bridge connecting Detroit to Canada. It's called the Ambassador Bridge. There is also a tunnel that connects Detroit to Canada. The tunnel can only take passenger traffic. It cannot take commercial vehicles, okay? And so if you are a truck, a commercial vehicle, something larger than a passenger car, you have to, at this point, take the Ambassador Bridge, right? And the owner now of this bridge is a family who has owned it for decades. The patriarch has now passed away, and now the son runs or owns the Ambassador Bridge. And let me just tell you, this is a problem that has been decades in the making. The fact that there is only one suspension bridge in, crossing the border. And the deal here is, and it's something I was interviewed last week for a newspaper from Canada. The owners, the Maroon family, and the current owner, Matthew Maroon, is not wanting competition. So let me say, it's not just when you cross the bridge to Canada or back from Canada to Detroit, you pay a toll, right? Of course. But in addition, there are other goodies that he makes money on. There's duty-free shops. There's gas that you can fill up, which is a few pennies less a gallon if you fill up there. But he's keeping his company, the Maroon family's company, is keeping, apparently it's like discounted by like 60 cents. They're keeping that. There's so much money they make on this bridge. I want to say that I had read it was around $60 million a year that they make on the Ambassador Bridge. Okay, so that is one thing. And they have not wanted, they've been trying to block this bridge for years. And this history around here, around this, is that it was back in like 2008, 2009, when they were first having discussions about building a second bridge. And it's not just about competition being good, it's also about commerce and traffic and needing people to be able to, you know, commute across, right? Okay. And finally, President Obama, in I think it was 2013, signed a permit to allow for the building of this bridge. The bridge has been entirely funded by Canada, and we are, Michigan and Canada are co-owners. I think it might be Michigan and Ontario being co-owners of this bridge, or just Michigan and Canada. And the idea is for a period of time, Canada will be able to collect the tolls. So what you should know is years ago, this guy, Matthew Maroon, his father, Matty, was put in prison overnight for contempt of court because he refused to honor these orders that they were supposed to change the on-ramps in some way to make them more accessible, and he wasn't. Why? So let me just tell you, last week, like it was last Monday, the new owner, the son, Matthew Maroon, flew down to Washington, met with Howard Lutnick. Yes, Howard Lutnick, Commerce Secretary of the Epstein files, met with him in person. We don't know what they talked about, but I think we can surmise that he was moaning and groaning about the second bridge, which has now been built. It's built and ready to open. It's called the Gordie Howe Bridge, named after Canadian sports figure Gordie Howe. I think he plays hockey. You would know that better than me. Just kind of kidding. And it's ready to open shortly. The last-ditch effort, because he has tried in lawsuits. This family has done everything to try to shut this down. He flies down to Washington, talks to Howard Lutnick, and the next thing we know, later that day, Donald Trump's out on his Truth Social account saying suddenly that he is against this bridge opening, right? So this is what I said in this piece in the Windsor Star, that it smells like a shakedown. This is how Donald Trump operates. And I do want to let you know, and I know Virginia is in the green room now, so I'm going to bring her up in a moment. I do want to let you know that I have a lot of opinions about this. So I'm going to drop the article I'm interviewed in, and we can talk about this a little more later this week. But to give you a sense of this, I live 1 mile away from the Canadian border. I'm literally like a mile, 1.1 miles north of that border. If I am driving around, either going to, if I have to get in my car, because I walk everywhere around here, but if I get in my car and I'm going somewhere downtown or headed to the airport or what have you, I often see signs that say Bridge to Canada. And I laugh and say, tempting. I have family in Windsor. When I was a kid, we went over the border all the time. And the idea that we have only had one bridge and one tunnel in my lifetime, and truly for, I want to say, like a century, this is close to a century, ridiculous. Okay. And we know, and what I want to tell you one last thing about this, and this is what is so troubling. I am certain that there is a way to have had the conversations, and this is the most troubling. This guy, Matthew Maroon, if he met with Howard Lutnick, and even if he decided to give Howard Lutnick a gift, a very large gift, a gigantic gift, in cash, in jewelry, in boats, even if he said, here, take this money, all I'm asking you to do is to ask Donald Trump to get on True Social and say he hates the bridge. That wouldn't be illegal under our laws. Thank you, U.S. Supreme Court. Because paying for access or paying for someone to tweet something out on True Social is not, it may be quid pro quo, this for that, something of value in exchange for an action, but that action that Lutnick is taking, talking to the president, isn't considered an official act, and tweeting something out, posting something on True Social isn't. So I can tell you that stinks to high heaven, but would not be illegal. And it's pretty easy to clean up these laws. I got a whole list of amendments to existing legislation. And one last thing, because I'm a little still ornery about this, and I know Virginia's waiting. As you know, when Merrick Garland became Attorney General, and I think I've told you, but some of you may not have heard this, and I know Virginia hasn't, so let me just get pissed off about this. I was contacted by a senator's office who I've worked with before behind the scenes, and also contacted by a public interest organization. And the senator's office said, the Department of Justice is assembling a group to talk about white collar crime and how we step up enforcement, right? And when I got this call, remember my book, Big Dirty Money, had been published. You shouldn't remember, I'm just telling you that. It had been published by then, because it was published October of 2020. And so, of course, because I had worked with this particular senator about public corruption issues, edited documents, anyway, I don't need to go into that. This senator's office knew me. So they said, we've put you on a list of someone who we're recommending you, as someone who should be part of this advisory group, informal, non-paid advisory group, right? Do you have any other names, right? And I gave 2 names of people. These were people who practice in the area of, they're like, lawyers who bring class actions on behalf of consumers and so on. So I thought they would be good advocates, and one who also deals with False Claims Act cases. Anyway, point is, I thought these would be good people. And I hear nothing. And around a year later, one of those friends was mentioning that he'd been in DC, and we had this conversation. It turns out the 2 people I recommended were put in this advisory group, and I wasn't. I'm one of the nation's experts on white collar criminality. I co-author a case book on this. I have a popular book that had been reviewed in the New York Times book review by James Stewart, author of Den of Thieves. I have a lot of suggestions. I was good enough to recommend people, but not have me around. And why? Because I don't play the part anymore. I would actually have pushed people, and they don't want to be pushed. But I'm not giving up. We will get those legal changes when we get Donald Trump out of office. And with no further ado, I think she's here. Hi, I'm going to bring Virginia on stage. And before I do, I want to tell you that the article I want to talk with her about and her work is on her Substack. And I'm going to drop that into the chat. And what I love about her Substack is that she calls it politics. She has a little tagline, which is politics for English majors. And I really think that my whole approach to law is law for English majors. And so let me bring Virginia up on stage. I have not seen her in years. Hey, how are you?
Jen, it is great to see you.
It is so amazing to see you. I think, did we see each other in person in New York at Dahlia's book opening?
At Dahlia's
book party.
Book party. And wasn't E. Jean Carroll there, which was one of the best parts of it. Yes. So it's good to see you.
I still remember, right? Because E. Jean was, we had Dahlia up there, and there was someone else. They were moderating E. Jean was moderating some conversation between Dahlia and one other person.
I think Robbie Kaplan was there too.
Because it was Robbie's old office, right?
That's it. E. Jean Carroll's a lawyer.
No, E. Jean Carroll isn't. Oh, her lawyer. Yeah, I thought you were saying E. Jean was a lawyer.
No, Robbie Kaplan is, I think, one of the heroes of Dahlia's book, Lady Justice, right? And
yes.
And the E. Jean Carroll case. And I think at that point, E. Jean Carroll had not yet been even. She had still more success against Donald Trump to come. So
yes.
It was we were celebrating, but we were celebrating the book. We were celebrating Robbie and Aegean's successes, but there was more to come.
And I just want to say, I'm sure you probably feel this way, privileged to be in the realm of these women. People may not know, Robbie Kaplan isn't just the lawyer who won 2 cases for E. Jean Carroll, but she brought the Windsor case, right, to the United States Supreme Court, which dealt with, it wasn't a case on gay marriage, right, but it was one of the first cases on equality for lesbian couples, the Edith Windsor case. Am I right?
I think that's right. And I also know that because Dahlia was living in Charlottesville in August of 2017 when the Unite the Right rally happened, and she and Robbie found a way to bring a lawsuit, and I don't remember the details, but it was like one of those things where Robbie was at the center of so much important legislation, and the argument of, or like these important crux cases. And Dahlia in Lady Justice was making it clear that there were a huge number of female lawyers, including you, who had, who were fighting Trump, who were the first responders with the current and then growing fascist regime.
And one last thing, I just could take a quick look. Yeah, so the Windsor case was where the law Clinton had signed, the Defense of Marriage Act, was part of it was struck down because that was a law that that then allowed, because this decision came down in 2013, and the Defense of Marriage Act denied federal recognition of gay marriage, right? And so that got struck down. But it was a later case, if I recall correctly, that then dealt with having other states recognize, giving full faith and credit to marriages. But you're right. The thing in Charlottesville, I mean, she won a really important civil rights case, and I think almost bankrupt. Was it the Proud Boys or one of those other Unite the Right organizations? I mean, so I don't remember all of it. Guys, trust me that. So when I see Virginia, I see her as part of this sort of Mount Olympus of women and me looking up. But I know I have, I don't have imposter syndrome, but I would never put myself up on the mountain. I would be in the corner taking notes about this. But thank you for being here. And speaking of the Trump administration, it's back. And we're learning so much more about how awful Donald Trump is. And just when you think what you knew would no longer disgust you, it gets worse. And what I love about the piece, and maybe you can then sort of set it up for people who haven't read it, that you wrote, is when you're writing about Epstein, you're telling a story that makes clear that exploitation of girls and women is and always has been about power and money in these dangerous networks, including the sort of goal of white supremacy. So can you kind of tell people what this piece is about, and anything else that you want to talk about Epstein today? And being in the files, sorry, that's the other piece.
Being in the Epstein files, yeah. So your viewers and listeners may have seen that the UN has now opened up an investigation into crimes against humanity that are documented in the Epstein files. And part of the language of that, the UN's commitment is that they've said that these crimes against humanity were committed, or they proposed that they were committed against a backdrop of extreme misogyny, racism, and a number of other ideologies. And just as I was reading something about this, just as I was coming to see you, and I realized that it's that backdrop. So the backdrop of extreme misogyny that I had stumbled into when I joined an organization called EDGE that turned out to be sponsored by Jeffrey Epstein. Now, I didn't know at the time. What I was told was, this is in 2009, what I was told was that EDGE was a salon for, and I noticed that it was supposedly a salon for intellectuals. I think it was a salon for pseudo-intellectuals, but I'll get to that. And I joined this because John Brockman was my literary agent. He was kind of face of it. And I was also very dazzled by the people in EDGE. So I looked at the list, and it was people like Ian McEwan and Yuval Harari and Richard Dawkins and Daniel Kahneman. These are giants in the field. Now, Marina Abramovich, so it wasn't entirely men. And I looked at the list, Steven Pinker, right? I mean, it was sort of, you name it.
You'd be foolish not to show up at least for one meeting and say hello and see if you connected with any of these people. They're giant thinkers, or we thought they were. But yes,
that's right. They were giant thinkers, and part of the reason that I sort of talk about the names on the list, and anyone, it's unbelievably, edge.org is still up. You can go and look through the list and see, what strikes you, because and not all these people are guilty of anything, but what you will notice is there's a certain tenor to intellectuals of the period. Sorry, this was true. It was true in the 90s too. There were a certain kind of just arrogant great man that you suspected when you were in college wasn't quite on the level with his ideas. Like, this is the guy that ultimately, first of all, that came to be known as part of the intellectual dark web. They did those kind of tricks that we now associate with the far right, the just asking questions, what if women, I don't know, what if women just exaggerate rape? Or what if they don't really suffer after sexual assault? These were real questions they were asking. What if homosexuality is just a virus? It's just an infectious disease.
And the intellectual pretense is, can you make, that it's sophisticated to make those arguments, right? And
that's right.
Then push the Overton window to the point where that is the center of the discussion.
Exactly. So right. So any suggestion that you, and maybe people can understand this, that when we were undergraduates, any suggestion that you might have balked at something or thought like, well, that sounds kind of racist, would be, later dismissed as you were being too woke, or maybe you were being at the time too prudish. So when I first went to meet with John Brockman, my agent, when he was telling me, this is my literary agent for tech writing, when he was telling me about what Edge was going to be, one of the first things he did was point out that his office had been the former Playboy Club. So I'm not such a prude that I don't know that the Playboy Club existed. So I'm laughing. And then he points to something on the wall that he describes as like those kind of meat hooky S&M sort of things. And instead of saying like, that's kind of weird, that's kind of disturbing, because I feel I was so trained not to come across as overly woke or overly sensitive or prudish or provincial. I was like, oh, that's so amazing and sophisticated and cool. I love those meat hooks on the wall. And
oh my God.
Those are these small moments of kind of grooming that happens.
I mean,
up and down, right?
It's a protective measure too, because it's not just about the sort of the culture where you're taught not to be prudish. It's also, it's a danger. It's a sign of danger when you see that, because you can imagine what happened to the person or what's represented there. And to save yourself, I bet you even laughed, right? That is the instinct.
Of course I laughed. And, I'm pretty new to the notion of the pick-me girl. You probably have heard of this, but
it's painful to hear about that. I hope I wasn't one of them, but yikes.
Well, I think in some ways we all are, right? Because trying to advance,
yes.
Yeah. So, right, trying to advance in an organization, and Edge was, it's to say majority male understates the case. There were no brown men in it except ultimately Deepak Chopra. And by the way, many of these men show up in the files, which I'll just get to in a second. But there were so all white men. And then
did they describe how often they met and how often you kind of met with them, just to give people a sense of what it was and where they met and all that?
So Brockman had a kind of grand way of talking about this as a salon.
When you say salon, I dream, like, I think Gertrude Stein, Between the Wars in Paris. I dreamed of being, when I was in college, to be at a salon. It sounds wonderful, but this was not Gertrude Stein's salon, I guess.
Well, it was okay. So it was entirely online. So it had been early on. It had been this organization called the Reality Club that was started in 1980, and it was a group of really, like, galaxy brain guys that included Stephen Jay Gould, John Searle, the philosopher, Stuart Brand, who had been one of the merry pranksters and then ended up starting the Whole Earth Catalog. So he was kind of like into psychedelics. And they all came together and said, Stuart Brand said explicitly, we need to oppose the sleepy wisdom of the humanities, the whole he said, she said thing. That was one of the things they wanted to not be part of. So the whole he said, she said thing was, I guess, gender relations, women, who knows? But they didn't want the humanities. That's what they didn't want. They didn't want the humanities, and they didn't want humanism. They didn't want conversations that they thought were about, like,
well, it's funny you say he said, she said, but what they're saying is there's one view of perspective of things. It's my view. And we don't want other voices, because when you read even fiction, first person narratives or third person, when you get into the window of someone else's experience and understand it might differ from yours, if you come from a position of money or privilege, then you can sort of understand maybe things aren't fair, and maybe maybe there is no sort of white male norm, and it would displace their power. They were very scared of what was happening, right? Because we're talking for people who are younger. I don't think I have many watching the show. A lot of these major colleges only only let women in the late 60s, early 70s. We're starting to see the rise of diversity and, African American studies department, women's studies departments happening in the 80s. And now you're into this period where it's like Susan Faluti's, this is major backlash, and these guys don't want to let go of their power, right? And there are people like you and I who have advanced in this power structure. And I'm just going to say it, we present as attractive in a certain way, right? And I didn't really think about it, that men older than me gave me opportunities because of how I looked. And when I think about that, let me just be clear. I worked super hard at a private school. I went to Yale, I went to Harvard, but still there are moments you still have to present. It's like the Barbie story. You still have to try to thread that needle. And when you thread it, people look at you and they think, did she sleep her way to the top? And you're like, fuck off. But if you don't look a certain way, then you're a bitch. I mean, there's no winning. Anyway, I'm going off, Virginia. This is you have the floor. I will shut up.
Well, I'm actually glad, because it's amazing how many people's experiences in academic life are made sense of in a way by the Epstein files. But okay. So I'll go back to the pick me thing. Basically, if anyone who's like been the one of one or two women at the table, you want to make it clear that you're not going to be the constant scold, right? And that you also are like quite at home with conservative arguments, So, and a number of small things that don't seem so toxic at the time, and I don't feel complicit in it, but I just realized how long and how many things I'd been overlooking, and the rise of this really right-wing way of talking is one of them. So, if you wondered what, like, you like Ian McEwan, the novelist, but you wonder what his, you never seem to run into him at any kind of like co-ed conference or any, he's not coming to like some feminist, like hear feminist speakers. Well, there he is in pictures with Jeffrey Epstein and so on. Another closer at home is David Brooks. So, oh God, I know. So, like, of course, how long have we all been reading David Brooks and thinking, okay, he's a conservative voice, but I can tolerate conservative voices. He's not a racist. And then he shows up at the Edge events, and he's sitting next to the other group of people at Edge, which are the tech gods, are tech billionaires. So Jeff Bezos, Jack Dorsey, Mark Zuckerberg, Sergey Brin, Larry Ellison, you name it. All of these guys came in and around Edge at its heyday. Jeffrey Epstein was paying for it. He was flying people on his private plane, appointed, I should say, with mink and sable throws. So like fur on his plane, and catering meals from Le Cirque on his plane to fly out these people to go to the tech conference. That was the way, part of the way that was.
I've been on boondoggles at corporate paid things, but nothing of that level, I've got to tell you.
No, exactly. So, and everywhere you turn, there are people, these kind of gods and Oxford Don types and Richard Dawkins. And so, yeah. So I joined this. Now I should say that really early on, I realized that Brockman, while he showed me a lot of pictures, and these are the pictures that you now see that are in the Epstein files or that leak of the David Brooks people and Marvin Minsky, and pictures of people with best-selling books about like brain science or atheism. Sam, oh my gosh, what's wrong with me? Sam Harris is another member of it. I mean, I'm naming names because you can look at edge.org. But these people would have their pictures taken with the tech billionaires, and Brockman loved those pictures because they showed how many introductions he had made and how powerful he was. And so those pictures are everywhere. And a lot of times when people have found some new person in the Epstein files like Brooks, they're pointing to photos from those parties. Brockman showed me pictures from those parties, but never invited me to those parties. Yeah.
This is the part, this is when I read your piece, what you're about to say, that hit me in the gut. Continue. Yeah. You don't get invited to these billionaires parties, right? But
there's emails in the recent tranche of Epstein files that are an exchange between Epstein and Brockman, where Brockman says, we have got to allow 1 or 2 women at these things. And Jeffrey Epstein says, you're turning woke too, or he doesn't say woke, but no diversity. We're not doing that. This is all men. And Brockman finally says, no, you still, I've got to invite these 2 women. I think it's Alison Gopnik and someone else. And Epstein finally folds on that. But the point is, there had not been any women. And Brockman explicitly told me at the events, we can't have women at the events because then we can't like talk the way we really want to. And this was another one, Jen, it was like the meat hooks when you said we can't have women. I honestly was just like, no, makes total sense. Sure, got it. Like,
but
I
can understand. I can actually understand rationalizing it in a way, because you might think there are spaces where you only want to have women to really be able to talk, right? Except the difference, of course, is men, in the context of men and male domination, it's a bit different. But I can understand thinking, okay, but what about some of the events? Like, what about, I understand having like an offsite, male bonding offsite where you really sort of say, hey, I'm having these feelings, and someone talks you down from being a misogynist pig. But like, that's not what it was about. But none of the events? I mean, okay.
I mean,
kind of apartheid there.
Yes, there were, it doesn't quite matter, but there were 1 or 2 women who often like Brockman's own wife is sometimes on the pictures. And there was one, so most of the intellectuals, or like whatever we were, most of the female intellectuals were too old to be of interest to them. So that was me, but that there were some one young intellectual who did get invited to things. And she ended up going to the island, which was incredibly, I think, disturbing to her. And that's a story I know one day will want to tell. But so but I did start pulling threads at how this thing started, because I just couldn't believe that there was I felt like Erin Brockovich or Frank Serpico or something, like, what is going on here? The more I saw the pictures, the more the money was consolidated among the tech monopolists, the more I came to understand who people like Peter Thiel were, or David Sachs were, David Galerner, who just resigned his post at Yale, Larry Summers, obviously. I was really amazed at the power that was starting to be consolidated at every level. I'll give you just one example. A few years before I joined Edge, I got my PhD from Harvard, and I got the PhD diploma. And
in what field?
In English.
Oh, you have a PhD in English?
Yes.
Did you work with what year? What year did you get that?
I got it long after I started, but I started in.
Yeah. When did you start?
Oh, yeah. Okay. 91.
We would have been, I was in law school. I graduated from law school in 93. And when I was at Harvard, I was missing my English major roots, and I would sometimes go to Elaine Scarry's classes. Did you work with her?
Elaine Scarry was one of my real mentors there, and we're still in touch. Elaine Scarry, I'm so glad you mentioned.
Okay, go ahead. I mean, we have to, we have to be friends. Okay. So let's do that offline. We have to be
friends. And also because I was crossing the campus to go to law school classes at the cyber law seminar that Charlie Nesson started.
Oh my God. I had Nesson for evidence. Okay. This was before Jonathan Zittrain was there, and I know him from college. Anyway,
Jonathan brought me to that. But the thing is, this isn't irrelevant.
Guy, and I'm glad he's not in the Epstein files. I can't imagine him being in there.
I know. Although he's had his own
oh shit.
Distant brushes with this, but it just how it's like the Keir Starmer thing, like the people who tolerated the going to the island.
And I just want to point out to you, not in defense of them, but the way you were on the edge of edge, so to speak.
Yes.
And those men, no one lets you in and tells you everything. It's like, first you see the meat hook, then you see a 15-year-old girl, and all of a sudden you're like, oh shit. And you have to make that choice. And it's a difficult, I think people, is she 18 or is she 15, and then it's just a disaster for these people. But go ahead.
I mean, one thing, you're from this world, so it's, so you're going to be familiar with each beat in the story. But one thing I've sort of been saying to people who worked in different domains or had different experiences is the Epstein class, the influences of the Trump Epstein class, or the Epstein class on Americans is just, it's so far reaching. So a tiny thing like, let's just say, so that we were all recognizing discontinuities everywhere, through the turn of the century, and certainly, for the past 25 years, just something weird going on. So I'll give just one example. Some of the survivors have been very clear that they recognized that there was a sexualization of young girls going on in Victoria's Secret. So something that I had missed going into malls was that they started offering thongs to girls that were 10 and 11. And at some point, you could have just been a regular girl walking through a mall and just thought, you know what, do people really want hairless, emaciated girls with huge boobs who look like they are, 13? Why is this the aesthetic of now? It doesn't have to be. But we metabolized each one of those things. It's like these tiny traumas of weird things that were going on.
Well, everything from the 60s of Twiggy, right? Emaciated girls look prepubescent.
Yep.
And what is that whole story? Right.
But the fact that Victoria's Secret itself laddered up to the owner of L Brands, Les Wexner, who was also Jeffrey Epstein's biggest client, means that there was that kind of pedophilic aesthetic being like carefully curated. Not to mention Abercrombie and Fitch is all part of that, and Abercrombie and Fitch has its own trafficking scandal. So you have all that mall culture, one thing, But then take something bigger like the financial crisis. The Epstein class's fingers are all over the financial crisis. And
well,
so
John Paulson is, the one I think of prime in there too. Yes.
And
Larry Summers.
Really.
I mean,
and
what?
And Larry Summers, right?
Yeah.
So and these are like heads of banks having to, and finally Jess Staley resigning for child rape. It's just crazy. But anyway,
mm-hmm. You're talking about kind of pieces of things that you didn't see that were sort of there in the background that move into the foreground is what you're talking about, I think.
That's right. Exactly. And I think that that's something that if we think that a certain kind of history or contentment with this like neoliberal project has dead ended with fascism right now, that we're really at this moment of a complete audit, a complete referendum on what we think about like the lives of women and girls, or what is going on. And we're going to get to race in a second.
Right. I was waiting for the intersectional moment, but yes, you're going to get there.
The consolidation of power, the monopolizing with the banks and the tech companies, all these things, it feels like very much like we're at an end, a terminal point for how much of this we can tolerate. I mean, we're now to the point where the UN has accused some of the most marquee men of our time of crimes against humanity in the US. Who knows what will come of that, but that's what we have been sort of in the pall of all this time. And I really think that if you go back to testimony by any of the victims, and some of the victims are even just now telling their stories on TikTok and social media, if you go back to any of them, they were the early warning signs. They were the people that said, this isn't really right. Or, maybe someone Larry Summers didn't promote because he thought women had smaller brains, could have said, I think that this is strange that the president of Harvard thinks that women are intellectually inferior to men. We're going to just live and this is real.
Let me just drop a footnote. I did organize a letter among academics and others. It was starting to be women, but then I think men joined it to write to President Obama saying, do not pick Larry Summers to be Fed chair. And I wondered, this is the kind of shit I do. And I think, is this going to hurt me? But I've so far passed this, will this hurt me? That I just keep going. I mean, but yes.
That's it. Well, now, right? It just it doesn't matter. I think of Nora Ephron's book, Heartburn. I don't know if you remember, but at the end, she's about.
I never read it, but I read her sister's work, Della Ephron's work. Anyway, but I know about Heartburn. But go ahead. What does she say at the end?
I think that her marriage to Carl Bernstein is breaking up, and she has a pie in her hands, and she thinks, if I throw this pie, I hate him. I want to throw this pie at him, but if I throw a pie at him, he won't like me. And then she just says,
"Oh my God!"
Like me anyway, bam. And that's how I sort of feel like Larry Summers doesn't like me anyway. So I think I'm going to take a few shots at him in this piece. It just feels, it's like once you're past that point, you just stop being the pick me girl forever. Don't pick me, guys. Go ahead. Go back to your
or as my mug says, my friend gave me, fuck off, I'm writing. That's kind of, basic.
Absolutely. Right. So it started to dawn on me, not just that women were left out, but that a lot of the work that people were doing was Charles Murray adjacent. So Charles Murray, the author of
the Bell Curve. Yeah.
He was a member also of EDGE. And he, I'm sure well, listeners probably know too, that he wrote this book, The Bell Curve, and since then has been a proud white supremacist. It's white supremacist with a fancy Ivy League sheen. I mean, there's nothing that any kind of Klan grandmaster or Mein Kampf doesn't say that, it's exactly in sync with what Charles Murray says, but he just says it in this fancy way. And the thing about not just that he's a crank arguing over and over again for his own and white male intellectual superiority to Black men and women, but he's also the person that all these men mobilize to defend whenever he is in trouble for speaking somewhere. So
Ooh.
he would get invited by like right-wing groups to campuses and then be protested, as he should have been, as a white supremacist. But then a kind of peripheral anti-woke group would get up in arms, and I'm thinking Barry Weiss ultimately, right? All the founders of the Free Press would suddenly mobilize to defend, oh, I don't believe, I don't defend what he says. I don't defend the argument.
It's about speech, she
It's about
says.
speech,
Then look at
right?
what she's doing to CBS. It was never about speech.
It was never about speech. And probably most people suspected that a lot of this stuff wasn't about speech, because I didn't see them really defending some of the like outlandish radical feminists whose work got completely crushed at the time. There was no one on the left that they were ever defending. They were mobilizing over and over again. Oh, surprise, another dangerous idea being brought to campus. That's how they put it at Edge. Dangerous ideas. What were the dangerous ideas? Were the dangerous ideas that like we all need to stop driving cars to save the planet? No, the dangerous ideas were always maybe white men are apex predators and the rest of us deserve to be subjugated by them. One time after another. Oh, surprise, maybe black men are inferior to white men. Oh, shocker, maybe women kind of want to be raped. Those are the like over and over again, the dangerous ideas. None of them dangerous, all of them titillating to this kind of group of guys that love.
Right, they weren't rallying around the Andrea Dworkin descendants who say,
that's right.
Right. I don't need to.
Right,
that's not what they were saying.
Right, they weren't like, I respect everyone's right to free speech. Let's bring on these Andrea Dworkin heirs who say all sex is rape, and men should be shipped off to another island. Never. Oh,
or as E. Jean Carroll said in her book, that they should be shipped off to South Dakota. Do you know, just as a footnote, at the trial, it was, her subtext of, what are men good for? I think that's the name of it. And a modest proposal. At one point, she said they should go to re-education camps. I think it was South Dakota or North Dakota. And this comes up at the trial. I was there. I don't know if you were at the first trial. And Joe Tacopino mentions this, and Judge Kaplan had to say to him, that was satire, and actually quoted from Swift's modest proposal, because Tacopino did not know that. See, people need to study literature.
English,
but anyway,
exactly. Study.
But you're talking about sort of we get into, you're talking about the sort of Charles Murray white supremacism, domination, and holding on to a kind of patriarchy that excludes anyone other than them from power or voice or self-actualization, agency.
And anyone exhausted by doing, anti-racist analysis or feminist analysis, like we don't have to do it anymore, guys. Like, these are things where the Program for Evolutionary Dynamics at Harvard say, just take one thing, which often taught that like rape is a natural prerogative of men, or, the black people are inferior. Program for Evolutionary Dynamics, PED, P-E-D, which apparently
oh my God, are you flipping kidding me? P-E-D?
I'm not kidding. P-E-D. It was an in-joke with Epstein and Martin Novak, who also
this is sick.
Founded the organization with $6.5 million from Epstein. Founded an organization.
They called it PED? You had me at that. Are you fucking kidding me? Oh my
Program
God.
for Evolutionary Dynamics. This is happening on the same campus that you and I are on, right? And like, why are they getting $6.5 million? But, oh, well, I guess guys in the sciences get that. So they're over there doing that. Martin Novak is exposed as an intellectual fraud who's committed all, as part of this replicability crisis where his work doesn't replicate. Now the files surface. And I mean, you've probably, every moment in the files, it's so horrible, and you forget them because there's so many. But Martin Novak is asked by Epstein in one of the emails, did you torture her?
Right.
That's just a question to ask a Harvard professor who runs PED and is also a fraud. And that is just one of the people. You pull on the thread of these people. Robert Kurzban, David Galerter, Robert Trivers, evolutionary biologists who are either fired for, have since been fired for like sexually abusing a 15-year-old. That was Robert Trivers. Or recently for, other kinds of like Me Too era offenses, or just things that go so far too far. We are so far from talking about microaggressions or systemic, rape culture. We're talking about rape now. We're simply talking about people that monopolized resources in the academy, in this case, and used it to promote rape apologetics and race science.
Right. And also, let me just say, and then because this stuff is so severe, people may not see that the whole dismantling of what they call woke, which is anything, well, who said this recently? There's someone on Blue Sky, which is, this is why we need gender studies. If you don't see, if you cannot look at the whole Epstein and even Trump administration through the lens of gender and this kind of, Donald Trump, the idea that he is supposed to represent toxic masculinity, but he wears more makeup than I do every day. That we cannot, you need so many, that you need, and if you cannot use, intersectionality, and I'm totally spacing on, we were at Harvard when she invented it. You know who I mean, the creator of, I'm thinking of calling her Goldilocks because that is her, intersectionality. You know who invented this? Kimberly Crenshaw. I'm sorry, Kimberly Crenshaw. Yeah. These ideas were emerging when I was in college and law school, and they are getting crushed. Like critical race theory, the lies that people are talking about. We need critical race theory now, especially because. So go ahead. This is where you're going to get to that. And oh my God, we have to go at 10, but we can continue this offline. But or 10-ish, but yeah.
So what was astounding is while this group of people I have explicitly named here, including Larry Summers, including all these people, were consolidating a worldview. And the worldview is very simple. The worldview is we, meaning the white men of edge, are apex predators, and it is good and natural for us to subjugate everyone else.
Right.
If you read any one of their treatises, they can start anywhere in the equation. They can be talking about anything, and it all leads to that idea. And that's true for Steven Pinker, and that's true for Sam Harris, and that's true for these books that sat on the front table at Barnes & Noble or on the front page of Amazon for so long, just controlling and sterilizing what we were allowed to think. While these other interesting ideas from gender studies or from critical race theory were being constantly demonized, so much that now post-colonial studies have been destroyed at Columbia. These are the exact departments that when Trump finally took power, he set out to destroy. One thing that Vincent Roy said, a critical race theory person, is that that sound ideas, so sound intellectual work like critical race theory, is an incredible threat to unsound intellectual work like race science. So hopefully some of those really good scholars will come back. The only thing I'll leave you with is that this wasn't just an intellectual project. Jeffrey Epstein did, as we're finding out more and more, try to seed the world with his great blue ribbon DNA and pull off a eugenics project based in New Mexico. He really, really did think that his DNA was top of the chain and that he could impregnate 20 women and start a eugenics empire of a master race with Jeffrey Epstein at the top. God help us.
I think I cannot end the show with anything better than that statement, Virginia. Thank you for taking the time. Obviously, I think we need our own podcast where we actually pick a narrow topic and then just go through it. I have decades of conversations I need to have with you. I'm realizing this.
I feel like that too. I know.
And by the way, it's so interesting because, tech, one last thing, is a very much male-dominated field, and so you found yourself there. I was at one point in finance, so I was often one of the only women at the table. But I got it. It's just sort of instinctively that I could see how these networks work and how things. Anyway, doesn't. But I often found myself as one of the only women at the table, and I think that worked for a while. It's to a point, and then when it stopped working. That was interesting. Anyhow, so thank you so much for your time. I'm going to catch up with you offline. Everyone needs to read her Substack. What is the actual name of your Substack?
It's called Magic and Loss, but you can find Magic and Loss, the Substack, and my podcast, which is called What Ref Beast, at vpheffernan.com. It's all there.
Okay, vpheffernan.com. I think Deb will throw that in the chat. Thank you for your time. And guys, have a great day. Tomorrow, people watching, I have another guest. I don't usually have 2 guests in a week. We're having David Rothkopf come on. Do you know David?
Excellent. Of course. I don't know him in person, but I know his work. That's going to be great.
And I know his sister well. She bakes cookies too. You should go on her show. She does politics and baking. I'll introduce you. Okay, guys. Thank you. Have a amazing folks. And Jason's walk-off music.
Hello, prison mates. It's the Jen Taub Show. Well, welcome everyone. Let's learn about what is happening in politics yesterday and today. There was hope, and we are together in this democracy we work for. And again, welcome to the Jen Taub Show.